And let's get started. Next slide. And so this morning we have an amazing group of panelists who have put forth an incredible amount of time and effort into this presentation. And we're excited to be able to hear from their lived experience this morning. Our panel facilitator this morning is Nev Jones. Dr. Nev Jones is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the Morsani College of Medicine at the University of South Florida. Herself an alumni of specialized early psychosis services, her work has revolved around early intervention in psychosis and coordinated specialty care for the last decade, with a particular focus on understanding the social or cultural context of the experience of early psychosis, pathways to and through care and engagement with services. Additional areas of focus have included peer support, supported education, and discharge and transition. Her research has been supported by the National Institute of Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, PCORI, and the National Institute of Health. She's currently the International Early Psychosis Association's only elected board member from the United States. In addition to her academic work, Dr. Jones has co-founded and co-led 3 peer-led regional organizations, including Chicago Hearing Voices and the San Francisco Bay Area Hearing Voices Network. In this capacity, she's provided direct individual and group peer support and developed numerous trainings, technical assistance, and support resources for youth and adults, faculty members, and providers focused on peer support in meaning-centered approaches to working and living with voices and unusual beliefs. Thank you so much, Nev and panel members, for being with us today. Nev, I'll pass it on to you, and we'll begin here shortly. And so we appreciate you sharing your expertise. We will have several questions in the Q&A pod, and I'll let Keisha Ludlow, Texas System of Care Project Director at the Texas Health and Human Services, lead us through that Q&A portion afterwards.
Awesome, thank you, David. The way we have this sort of organized, Trinity and Edith are 2 panelists, and we may be joined by a third. Will kind of introduce themselves, and then we're gonna take it from there in terms of a series of questions that we all agreed on to discuss and kind of work through. So Trinity, do you want to go ahead and start with however you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I will. Good morning, all. My name is Trinity Blue. I currently reside in Houston, Texas, and I will be speaking on this panel as a youth, giving my insight on mental health and first episode psychosis.
Awesome, thanks. And Edith?
My name is Edith Burns, and I have a son that has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I just want to share our journey and share with the world what we've gone through and what we've experienced along the way, and hopefully will help other people along the way.
Great, thank you both. So Trinity, how about we start with you? Just sort of kind of setting the stage for your other comments, asking sort of whether you were already receiving mental health services before your initial experiences of psychosis, and how you kind of got initially connected to services and supports.
No, I was not initially receiving mental health services. It was the facility that I was hospitalized at that actually recommended me into the program. So as I transitioned out of the hospital into treatment, the program that I'm with in Houston, Texas, MHMR, they actually took me under their wing, and then I started as an early onset patient.
Let's go on. And so you're just talking about how you first got connected. What are some of the words that you would use, or how would you describe from your perspective what it's like to kind of experience early psychosis?
A few words, kind of in a nutshell, that I would describe psychosis, uncontrollable, confusing, lost, definitely draining. I felt helpless, to say the least. To sum it up, those would be a couple of the words that I would use.
Awesome. Thank you. And now for a minute, we'll kind of pivot back to Edith with parallel questions from kind of a family perspective. Just sort of telling us a little bit about how you kind of first realized something was wrong, how your family got connected to services initially.
Yes. Well, with us, I always knew something was different with my son, but we could not figure it out. I mean, we lean more towards the autistic spectrum, but after going and seeking professional help and everything, that was ruled out, and he was misdiagnosed here and there, and it was just a long, long journey. And it wasn't until after he graduated high school that a series of events happened to where there were the stressors that just kind of ignited everything, and just it was one Friday night when he came in. Several things had happened that week, and he'd always gone for a walk at night, and he would come back and check in with me, but he'd been gone for too long. And I went out to look for him, and as I was going out the door, he was coming up the steps, and that's when I saw that his arms were really dripping with blood. Not to try to be too graphic, but it was that. And he just kept saying, I can't take it, I can't take it, I just want to kill myself, I just want to end it. And so we called, and then I went to get the emergency kit that we had, a first aid kit, and by the time I got back out there, he'd already taken off, and I didn't know where he was or what was going to happen next. So I called law enforcement and ambulance 911, and the officers were able to find him, and he was hospitalized that night, but was released the next day and didn't get the help that we needed. And it was several months before we got it, but finally through getting into the right facility and the right people, he was diagnosed with it, and our lives were forever changed after that. So it's been a journey.
Thanks, Edith. And just from your perspective, what did it kind of feel like to you? What were your feelings and struggles like kind of during this period?
Oh, wow. I don't really know the exact words, but it was, I would say our whole world was shattered. I mean, whenever we found out that he was actually schizophrenic, rather, diagnosed with that, the term itself just alarmed me because of what the media has said and society says, and what we've been trained to view what schizophrenia is, which is not at all what it is. But we both were like in shock and devastated, and his hope, what he was wanting to do for his career was, shattered. And but through getting the right help and being with his therapist that he has now, his social worker, his everybody that is with him now, is really what really has helped us to get through this and get on our journey. But it was a very rough ride. We didn't know where to go, who to turn to, because we didn't have any mental illness in my family. And I mean, we had ADD, but that's a disorder. I mean, that wasn't anything that we couldn't, deal with. But it was definitely a new chapter in our life, and went through some rough waters for several months before we could get the help. But once we got the help, now we got a great, strong team and a family support and support for his meeting his needs, it's working out much better now, but it was a big journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Edith. And just going back for a minute to your kind of references to sort of stigma and prejudice, what do you feel like sort of the most misunderstood things about psychosis and the experience are, as you were kind of initially coming up against those sort of myths and stereotypes?
Yes, it's just the word itself. I mean, immediately when people hear, and I've actually experienced this. I mean, this was an actual experience. Even family members, close friends, are like, oh my gosh, he's automatically going to kill somebody. I mean, that's what they link with that, is they're going to be a violent, out of control person, and it's not that at all. I mean, and it's kind of like a label that is misunderstood, and that's one of the things that, and one of the reasons why I'm here is because I want to tell the world and have a better understanding of schizophrenia. And when they can better understand it, then I think it's gonna be more acceptable in society. Because I mean, people just say, they just automatically think that it's gonna be what they see in Hollywood. And I'm not downing Hollywood, it's just most people just don't understand. They don't fully understand schizophrenia and what it's all about, and getting into their mind and the way that they think and feel and everything. So that's what my hopes is to be able to help people better understand schizophrenia and what it is, and not be afraid of that word, or whenever a person is given that diagnosis. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, Edith. And I don't know if this is a good point at which you might want to share a little bit just about your efforts writing a children's book about psychosis that kind of introduces this to younger kids.
Yes, ma'am. And that's one thing another thing that's on my journey that I really want, and I feel like if we can start with the younger generation, the ones that, are just starting out in life, because that's going to be our future generation, and reach out to them and write books on their level so that they will be able to understand that it's okay if you see a person like this, or this is the way that you can help this person, and do it through different characters. My son he's going into farming and being raising chickens. He's done that. We've done that all of our life, and so I'm trying to kind of gear the books more in that area to maybe it's like a chicken that has this, and it's subject, it could change. It doesn't have to be that, but kind of in helping him to get me to write, get my son to help me to write these stories so that they'll know what does it mean, what does paranoia mean, what does that look like, and kind of have the different characters experience this and be able to help them so that when they do see this happen, then I can relate with the character in this book. I also wanted not just with the children, but kind of they go to the kind of in between the teenagers, like what is it in the life of schizophrenic? What do they see? What do they feel? How does their world look? And kind of get them to kind of come into their world and experience what they're experiencing, so they can have a better understanding and maybe bridge that gap and make, when they hear the word schizophrenia or somebody's been diagnosed, be okay with that, not, if you will, freak out over it. That's one of my goals.
Really, really, really important work. And I think people are probably in the audience are probably aware of this, but while there has been some degree of effort to kind of introduce characters with experiences of psychosis or other mental health challenges in a more kind of positive, constructive way into adult film and television, we see very little of that geared towards younger kids, and sort of same thing for for kind of picture and chapter books. So really, really important work that you're doing, Edith. And then let's kind of pivot back to Trinity now with kind of a parallel question from your perspective. What are the sort of myths and stereotypes about psychosis and areas of misunderstanding that you've run into?
I feel like definitely violence is quickly assumed, and there's never really consideration of a mental episode or a chemical imbalance within the brain. You just think, oh my gosh, crazy person. That's such a quick assumption. Judgment, it's kind of like no question. You either are balanced or you're not. But they don't jump to mental illness. They jump to violence. I wish people knew that the patient does not have control of their actions to a certain extent. And whenever the brain is chemically imbalanced, I mean, what can your body do to catch up? What can your body do to counteract what your brain is not compensating? That's how I feel about the misunderstanding and the assumptions in first episode Psychosis.
Got it. And I'll ask Edith this too, but just in terms of at least your kind of your family and your more immediate circle of friends, do you feel like at least over time through knowing and interacting you and other supports that those any kind of stereotypes or assumptions have really kind of diminished?
I feel like my family being supportive, that was kind of my strength. They made themselves like open and willing. They laid themselves out to do whatever it was that will insinuate my stability. Anything that was positive and that would show growth for Trinity, my family allowed themselves to go through that with me. They're just as strong as I am because I would never be put in their shoes. You know, I can never understand what they went through, but I do know how much it helped me. And I would have definitely gotten discouraged if I did not have my family strength. They walked, you know, right by my side. And I feel like that's a vital role to play because some people have never experienced mental illness. And even though my family did not, I definitely feel like they understand some things that the general public do not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then just in terms of the sort of the questions that we settled on, right? The next set kind of concerns experiences with mental health providers and professionals. So just turning to that next, what have you found most kind of helpful and constructive in terms of your experiences of services or support from providers?
My team is amazing. I could not have asked for a better group of understanding people. I feel like they soften their hearts and they show empathy even if they've never experienced what I'm describing. They have made decisions for me when I was not mentally capable, and I wouldn't even do it differently. They got to know me and did not have an ounce of judgment in their hearts. They encourage healthy habits. They advise me things that they would advise their children almost, you know. They listened to me when I felt like no one else was listening. And they very strategically share a snippet of their own experiences that welcomed me to share mine. And I felt like I could relate to them on a certain level. And that built a bond of trust. That built it's something it's very hard to explain because it's an experience. It's a lesson that I will not only use at this age, but a lesson that I'll take with me forever as I walk through a lifetime.
So just in terms of, to follow up on that, like that really important point, sort of this kind of deeper understanding of how one kind of builds a trusting relationship, how one makes somebody kind of feel accepted in a deeper way.
Mm-hmm.
I
think, it was a sensitive, it was something sensitive to begin, but I couldn't have asked for anybody to do it differently.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of following up on that, right, our next question is whether there's anything that was not helpful that you've experienced, including outside of your early psychosis team, other kinds of providers, or anything that you would zero in on for kind of improvement.
I cannot say I would request improvement from my mental health care, but from the general public and specifically like police officers, I would definitely request patience. I would request that a little more understanding and not so quick to judge or assume a situation that you do not understand. I would request that people ask more questions rather than spewing out opinions. That's really what I wish to see in the world when it comes to mental health of myself and mental health of anybody else that may not be able to explain their situation.
So just kind of linking that to what you were saying earlier, it seems like a lot of what you're seeing and experiencing is just this kind of this leaping to assumptions, this not asking questions, not trying to hear somebody's story, and those assumptions very often being tied to violence or other really damaging stereotypes.
Yes.
Yeah. We will, I'll kind of maybe circle back around to this if we have time, which we should after we get through the sort of the agreed on questions. But just kind of pivoting back then to Edith with the same set. What has kind of been most helpful about your experiences of providers? What, if anything, would you improve or want to see changed?
The most important thing I have seen that works the best is communication. And when my son, for 2 months, when we were trying to get the help, he was hospitalized over 9 times during that month. Various hospitals he went to, and the hospitals where the psychiatrist talked to his psychiatrist, and they were a team and they worked together and they put the family in the loop and everybody worked together, he stayed out of the hospital longer time. The ones that where, and I was actually told by a psychiatrist, well, I'm the psychiatrist here and this is the way we do it, and it was a failed experience. I mean, he was released from that hospital. He was not ready to be released, but he was. And the next day, or it might even been that night if I'm not mistaken, but it was a short time period. He was back in the hospital. Needless to say, he was not at that hospital, but I just know that when we have the communication, it bridges that gap and it closes like a team, because that's what it takes as a team to be able to help my son and others that have this. So I think working together and doing things to that effect, and like she was saying, with the law enforcement, they were wonderful when they came out to me and they would help me find my son. He would get lost in the woods. We live out in the country, no street lights. It's dangerous. People out there are Second Amendment believers and shoot first, ask questions second, if you will. And there's so many things that could have went wrong. And this one time in particular with law enforcement, my son took off out of the house with I'm talking big bladed knife, and was going to end his life. I told the officers what happened, what direction he went in, and they found him. And as a mother, so many things go through my head. I mean, one wrong thing and somebody could have fired a shot, or he could have done something. But the officers were very good. They did, go into the command mode, to drop the weapon, and they were able to talk him down. But each one of the officers that I spoke with says, we get training, but we need more training. They don't really have a full grasp on it. So that's my hopes, is I would even like to go in and share my story, even with law enforcement, to maybe give them a better understanding of what does it look like with them. You know, when you're coming at them, they don't, like with a person with schizophrenia, when they're in that moment, they don't see that person as a law enforcement person. They see that person as somebody trying to harm them. And what do you do as a human being when somebody's trying to harm you? You're gonna protect yourself, you know. And that's one of the things I learned too. You know, that's the way he was with me in that moment. He didn't see me as mom. He saw me in my way of his, you know, because we had to take his knives, you know, because of his doing self-harm. So that's one of the things that I think would be a good thing to improve on, is to kind of give them better understanding. And I agree with what Trinity said as well. You know, ask questions and take the time and to not just assume things. And as far as his team goes that he has working on now, this therapist is, he has two other ladies. I cannot think of the title, I'm sorry, but they are amazing. They work with him. Everything is about him. He may want a job one day, and another day he's like, I can't do this. But when he wants that job, they work with him. If he doesn't, then, you know, if he doesn't feel he's capable or ready to do that, it's just there. When you have the team and the support, that is where you're going to see more success, in my opinion. So that's just what I have to say.
That's a really, really powerful narrative, Edith, and just drawing out some of what you were saying a little bit more. It sounds like you're also talking about kind of this way that fear on both sides, especially kind of in these heated, maybe kind of emotionally tense moments, can really rapidly escalate if there's not sort of safeguards and a lot of intentionality in place. Yeah. And the context of like your kind of neighborhood, is it more rural? Is it a smaller community? Is it?
It's out in the country. I mean, it's like, I don't know how to explain it. Most people say we live out in the sticks. I don't know if that explains it better. There's no street lights out there. There's coyotes and wild animals to come out. Wooded areas where he got lost a lot of times in those areas. Whereas before, he could go in there in the daytime, he was fine. But at night, it really escalates and gets really, really bad. Probably about, at one time, it was from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock. It was like clockwork. We were seeing that pattern to start to come. And his psychiatrist picked up on that. So we started doing the medications to be able to help during that time. And so they being on board and listening and really understanding, and not just saying, oh, well, we'll just do this. Oh, this is just this. It's, I don't know, taking his feelings into consideration. And that, like I said, the officers were really wonderful. They would, I only saw my son in handcuffs one time, and I don't think they even meant for me to see that, but it was the first time it happened, and I was actually struggling to see where he is, because that was that awful night that everything, that the stressors came into effect. But any other time, they were very considerate about my feelings and about, you know, what was going on. But they would just, time and time again, that was their outcries, that they had the training, but they just didn't, they needed more on that.
Mm-hmm. And so were you experiencing often the same officers, because smaller community, was it,
Mm-hmm.
so you could kind of develop a relationship?
Yes. That sometimes it would be the same officer that would come out the day before, and they're like, okay, what's going on? Or the EMT might be, you know, still on duty, you know, and hey, we just came out. What's going on with you, you know? And like one of the officers, I remember my son sharing this with me, that night that he lost his girlfriend and everything was the first time that the stressors happened. One of the officers says, hey, my girlfriend just broke up with me, and you don't see me out there trying to kill myself, and he's kind of not making a joke out of it, but trying to relate to him to kind of ease the the hurt, and my son likes to joke and kid around, and he really connected with that. So I think that was really great on that officer's part to be able to step out and use his personal experience to kind of help him to be able to do that. So yeah, they knew him by name. They pretty much knew. I mean, before we'd have to almost tell him how to get to our house, and now it's like, yep, we know where you live. And that's good in one way because they get there quicker. But yeah.
And Trinity, just for comparison, you kind of, your neighborhood, urban, suburban, rural?
I live in a very suburban neighborhood.
Okay.
Specifically, like on the outskirts of Houston. It's newly built, still being constructed, and it's pretty diverse.
And do you feel like that changes maybe the dynamic and really nature of relationships with police officers, just setting differences, place differences, hearing kind of what Edith is saying?
I do not feel like where I live makes a difference in my experiences with police officers, because if I was in a rural place, if I was in a suburban place, I am still a Black woman. So my experiences will always be worse than, the counteractive race. And with that being said, my experience is what I make it. Because if I get pulled over for a speeding ticket and I have, a loud, sassy response, whether that's in a suburban area or a rural area, nobody is going to take that well. Mm-hmm. So the way I control myself and the way I respond will always shape whether I have a positive or a negative experience. So with that being said, if I keep myself together, God willing, the officer will keep himself together.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously it's just an incredibly critical point given what the whole country is really experiencing right now, and all the conversations going on about the intersections between race and policing. So really thank you for sharing those experiences and making that point. It's really important.
Yeah.
Okay. So just, I guess, kind of circling back around to either of you, Edith or Trinity, anything more either of you want to add about just experiences with providers and service systems?
I can make a comment about my peer. I believe the question kind of centered around, have I ever had a peer support system, and what was that experience like? My peer actually was the first person that kind of initiated my services to make me more fond of what it's like to receive mental health services, or what I need to do to better my treatment. So I think that was a very vital relationship, because if that had gone the wrong way, I would have completely been turned off from bettering myself mentally. So with that being said, that made me more willing to receive services because of how friendly she was, how she explained things thoroughly. She was a very comfortable mediator, and she made me understand all aspects of my treatment. And that kind of softened my experience, so to speak. It made me willing to go in a positive direction.
That's awesome. Did you kind of connect with her like kind of pretty quickly, and then she kind of sounds like kind of brokered your relationship with the rest of the team?
I don't believe I connected with her quickly, but I think her persistence, and I saw how much my health meant to her. And that made me prioritize myself, because mental health was something that I minimized because I had not experienced it before. I did not know how serious it was. I saw a question in the comments, that's like, what is it like having a diagnosis? I did not know until I had one. I can't say that it was always a negative perception, but whenever I got my diagnosis, I did not take it serious. And my peer telling me, hey, take your medications every day because ABC will happen, or, you know, try to do this and try not to do that. If she was saying it that many times, that made me see, okay, maybe I should actually do it. Maybe I should pay attention to what my doctor says. Her persistence 100% positively affected how I saw my health.
Thank you. And say a little bit more about like how you would contrast that to more typical mental health providers. What was different about your relationship with her? You were sort of starting to say some things just in terms of the nature of the relationship.
My provider, I think she saw that I was kind of a hard cookie to cut. And I kind of was not cutting it all. So she shared a little bit of her story. And I connected with her on a personal level before I did a professional level versus with my doctor. I feel like he was super scripted. And with that being said, I was close to what he was saying because I felt like it was very cookie cutter. You know, like, I'm not a patient to you, I'm a number. So their approaches were obviously really different. So my respect was not there because I like to know that I mean something to someone. Mm-hmm. It took me longer to value my relationship with my doctor because it was not personal at first. I felt like a statistic. I felt like he was talking at me. And again, I did not prioritize my own mental health, which is why I really encourage understanding rather than assuming and opinions. Because personally, I never wanted to accept that there was a chemical imbalance in my brain. So with that being said, if I ran into a person, specifically on my doctor or the front desk people, the administration, simply who have nothing to do with my mental health, these are just people who work at the clinic. I see that you don't care, and I already, I already need to care more about my mental health. I'm not going to give you that attention. I'm going to pull away from what the important thing is, Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I just felt like it was harder to connect because it was hard for me to accept that I had a problem. Not even a problem. Let's go ahead and say an imbalance. And it was easier for me to pull away from that when I saw that you did not have any consideration for my mental imbalance as well.
Right. So sort of, I think a lot of really important things that you're saying there, just to highlight again for folks, right? But just the difference between, I guess, being treated more like sort of just another patient and a relationship that feels real and emotional, and in which there's an investment in you, a genuine emotional investment in you as a person. Really, really important. And do you feel like over time that did kind of shift with your doctor, that it became a little bit more of a real relationship?
And that, very oddly, that connection was incited by my educational advancement. Whenever he could explain to me what he was doing, he specifically drew out, if you guys are familiar with biology, he specifically drew out a dendrite and explained to me the action potential in the synapse that goes across, to initiate whatever chemical is being transmitted. He specifically sat there and drew that out to me. And I'm like, okay, now I know what you're saying. And he's like, you're too smart not to take your medication. You're too smart not to know that you will be great in this world. So this right here is why I need you to take your medication on a daily as I prescribe it. This is why you need to get a sleep schedule. And I was not hearing anything he was saying until he connected with me on something I could genuinely relate to.
So sort of like, I guess what you're saying there is sort of like treating you like a kind of like a smart person, like not unlike maybe a professor-student kind of relationship instead of a clinician-patient.
Yes, it was, because I'm interested in education. That's something I'm always going to smile about. That's something I'm always willing to learn something. I'm always willing to share knowledge with someone. So it was kind of a soft spot.
Uh-huh.
It was a soft spot whenever he got medical with me versus, you know, throwing numbers at me. And when he broke it down, the 5 things that you should always stay away from, you know, never drink alcohol, never, you know, tobacco, always, always, always. When he broke it down to me like a parent rather than a physician, when he simplified things, and whenever I felt like he was, he softened his heart so that my heart could be nurtured. I quickly took heed, and now he's that guy. I trust him to make any decision in my life that I know I wouldn't be capable of making. If my doctor said that, then that's what I'm standing on, all 10 toes.
That was a really beautiful, really powerful description of how that relationship evolved, and definitely a lot of that I can relate to too. And then just, I guess, pivoting to you, Edith. So since we kind of launched onto the topic of kind of peer support and the peer relationship, anything to share about interactions with other families, family peer support from your perspective?
Yes. Well, like I said, you know, no mental illness was in our family, so everybody was shocked, and we kept it quiet for a long time because we had to get it, you know, wrapped around our head what was happening, and then my son just decided, I want to go open with this. I want to tell family, because we didn't tell a lot of family, you know, we just, I told my mom and my sister, but we didn't tell the whole family, and because we just didn't know. And so when we did open up, then they are, you know, they were very receptive, of course, and they're very, you know, what can we do? Do we need to do this when he's over here? Do we need to do that? Or does he do this? Can he? And it was just like, having family support is very, very crucial. And like what Trinity said, when you have a doctor that will do heart to heart with you, if you will, instead of just being another number or another patient, that makes all the difference in the world. I couldn't have said it any better. She was really good on it, hit right on, spot on. And then I think also, you know, having this support, some of his friends also support him. And he has a friend right now that if she's over and it's time for him to take his evening medicine, he's like, okay, I want to mention, no, you get up right now and take it, you know, because she's, you know, she's watching out for him. And if he does have a off night, and he's like, the voices are loud and I can't deal with this anymore, and he'll post something on Facebook, they'll come, or his phone will be like going off constantly with them coming in and supporting him. Hey, we're here for you. You mean something. And I think that's a big importance, is that he needs to feel like he's worth something in this world. He can be a productive member of society. He can be just like anybody else. He just has to go a different way, a different route of doing it, you know. So I think that's what it's been part of our journey, is trying to get him, you can be a productive member of society. You want to be this, you can be this, but you're going to have to work a little harder. You're going to have to reach into your toolbox a little more often, or, you know, your coping skills. And I think that's one of the biggest things, and has even helped me, is his team that he has. They're amazing. They not only help him, they help me, because I'm like, I'm lost. I need help. I need to know what to do, how to do this. And so they'll give me guidelines on what to do, and then I can help my family and everything on that. So I think just having that open communication and caring and loving and seeing them as a person and not just as a diagnosed, you know, like in a positive way instead of a negative way. I think that's the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really powerful comments about the importance of just social connections and still feeling like you belong and haven't just been rejected by society, rejected by friends and family.
Because there are some of his friends that I've had their parents, because he grew up with this one little girl. I mean, he would go play. In fact, their grandparents kind of adopted him. I mean, they just loved him. And that was before he was diagnosed. And now that he's diagnosed, she's scared to death of him. But he has never done anything. He's like a horse. He will fall over somebody, step over them before he would ever hurt anybody. His is self-harm, not to harm anybody else, but they just hear that word and so that hurts a little with him, a lot with him. And there's some family members that not my immediate family, but cousins and things like that are like, oh no, he's gonna do this automatic, so I think when he has that reassurance from the other family members and from other friends and outside sources to say, hey, you are somebody special, you can make it in this world, you count. That's really what they need to know, is they count. So they're just one of the psychiatrists that he says, just got your brain's just wired different. That's it. So I appreciated her saying that helped me too, to understand too, because society, people are cruel. I mean, they're just the honest truth, they're cruel, so we have to get back in there and build them back up, and I mean, she really said it better than I could ever say it. Trinity did a great job on that. So
yeah, no, well, thank you, Edith. And yeah, I think, kind of both of you have just really brought home in a powerful way how deep this connection or set of assumptions that kind of society holds linking violence and psychosis are, and how incredibly damaging that is when it plays out in terms of people's experiences and social interactions. And just pivoting back to Trinity, you already talked about kind of, the really kind of amazing support from your family. What about other, peers, friends, co-workers, just kind of the broader community?
I don't share with everyone my mental health challenge because I do not trust everyone. However, I'm very transparent when it comes to how I act, how I present myself, how I respond to certain situations. I feel like I speak clearly. I speak loudly. I'm going to make you aware of that. So I think my closest friends and people that I consider loved ones, they have grown to be very patient, because whenever you're going to go into an episode, that's not anything that can be predicted. But I think just as much as I've grown, they have grown as well. They have grown as well. They're kind of accustomed to my patterns. Whenever, I begin to recognize whenever I'm slipping, and I can kind of catch myself and say, hey, that was a trigger. I think my family, they see the triggers that I don't see. They avoid the things that do trigger me. And all in all, it works. It works to make me balanced. So my loved ones definitely have done a great job with recognizing certain signs of deteriorating mental health.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for all these just incredibly, I think, insightful points about relationships and how they matter and how they make a difference. We have a little over a half an hour left, and it looks like there are a ton of questions both in the Q&A and the chat. So I wonder if, just for more kind of the more kind of formal structured part, if we want to just end with sort of this question of what kind of, thinking about your experiences in their totality, you would sort of center or prioritize in terms of change, whether that's in society or in systems, and saying a little bit about that, and then we can kind of move to sort of answering some of the questions that audience members have. So maybe starting with, you want to start, Trinity?
Yes, I will. So all in all, to sum it up, I feel like I would like to see strength in communication about mental health and this being to the patient and their families specifically from professionals. You know, that relationship from professionals to patients and their families. I think the more that we know about our personal mentality from professional people who have studied this or who have experience in the field, the less wandering that we'll do in between our ears. This educates the patient, making us want to be healthier since we have the knowledge. This minimizes the what ifs. This lessens the, oh my gosh, I feel like this, can I? The more that we know, the more truth that we're exposed to, the less likely we are to make impulsive decisions. So I would definitely like to see better communication.
Awesome. So kind of knowledge is power too.
Yes.
And Edith.
Pretty much what Trinity said. Just communicating, understanding, and a better understanding of schizophrenia. What validating that they are people with feelings, and I just think communication and understanding is the key to doing that. And it's just, you know, and understanding too that it's not going to come overnight. You know, we just one step at a time. You know, like this was huge for me to do because I'm not a public speaker, and so to come out and to share personal experiences and things like that is very, it's out of my character to do that, but or my comfort zone, I guess I should say. But I want to be able to take that first step and be able to just keep on and maybe, you know, take the next step and just hand in hand together, unite, and try to educate the world one step at a time to understand it better and communicate.
Amen. And you guys have both done an absolutely amazing job. I know this is super, it's weird and pretty disconcerting in some way to be talking to 550 people that you know you can't see just through a computer or a phone. You guys, I don't know if you've had time to read all the chat comments or sort of glance at them, but yeah, no, just packed full of compliments and kind of testaments to the powerful way that you've impacted folks listening in. And so I think just because there are so many questions and so many great questions, maybe now we can turn to that. I think, Keisha, are you gonna handle the Q&A?
I am, yes. Thank you, Nev. And thank you both, Edith and Trinity, for sharing your experiences and your journey and all the insight that you all have. Again, as Nev said, if you have a chance to look through the chat, there's just so many accolades, and just thanking you for sharing all of that. We do have a lot of questions, so we'll go ahead and get into those. There are several questions, and some of you've shared some of this, but there are several questions around what can providers do to understand your experiences a little bit more in order to better help you in your journey. So I don't know, Edith or Trinity, whichever one of you wants to go first with that one.
I would say listen to what we're saying, but that's not the most of it. The most of it will be paying attention to our mannerisms, how we are saying it, the tone we're saying it in, our eyes, when what we are saying, because I don't know the exact number, but words are the least of what you're saying. You know, the way we present our body, our posture, because we may have trained ourselves to respond in a certain way, but that's not genuinely what we're feeling. So I would definitely say, study what we are saying as we're saying it. It could be like a defense mechanism to respond in a certain way. So help us by genuinely recognizing what the problem is.
Thank you, Trinity. Edith, do you have anything to add?
I would say like what she said is, and two, I know like with my son, sometimes he gets confused on reality and what's not reality. And he will tell stories, graphic stories, and of him being in the fire department and seeing a baby burned, and he will give graphic details as if he was there, when in reality he wasn't there. But if you don't talk to other family members and have that kind of connection with them, then you may even think that he has PTSD from that, when in reality it never really happened. It's just it's part of his illness, part of what he does. And so I think just being in touch, like what she said, not only with the words, but with the family members and what he's saying. Because I know with him, his body language says a lot, because he can say something, but his body may be saying the opposite of what he's really verbally saying. And sometimes he's not able to verbalize what he's really saying. So being in touch with the family, keeping them in the loop, I think is a really good help team.
Thank you both. Another question is, what are some of your strengths that each of you have drawn from through your journey?
I saw that question and I wrote a few of them down. One thing I did not have until a mental challenge was patience. This definitely taught me patience, because you're not gonna see change in a week. You're not gonna see change in a few days. It definitely takes some time to see that you're balanced or imbalanced. And endurance, willingness to take the time out to do the right thing and remain steady in doing the right thing. And lastly, timeliness. It's definitely taught me punctuality and timeliness, because keeping a schedule, having a team of 5, seeing them, whenever they're available, whenever I'm available, timekeeping, punctuality, all of that played a big role and strengthened me.
Thank you.
Well, one thing that it has done is, I'm also ADD, so I am like, everything's like, and I know the world does not work like that, but if it's off schedule or if it's, not where it should be, then change was not a good word in my vocabulary. But I'm accepting it more, and it's helping me to be able to understand, because it's constant change. You don't know from one minute to the next what's going to happen. And being able to change from, okay, we're okay, to process mode and we're still going to be okay, then I think that's one thing, being able to be consistent across the board and being okay that this is happening, and this is, kind of expectations, like what's it look like. One of his therapists uses that phrase a lot, and being able to communicate and use phrases better with him, and just to share what, kind of step out of my comfort zone. And I'm still learning that, but that's one of the things, is other people have it, and it's not just our world, it's a whole world of people out there. When my son went public, I got private messages saying, because I put it onto my Facebook page as well, saying, hey, we had that same experience, never knew. So just reaching out helps to reach out to other people, and just eye-opening. It's just change. That's all I can say. It's going to be our life.
Thank you both. There's a question for you, Edith, around what do you think the most important thing that a family partner can provide for families of individuals who experienced what you did?
Can you repeat that question?
Yes, sorry, I'll speak a little louder too. What do you think the most important thing that a family partner can provide for families of individuals who experienced what you did?
A family partner. Just be there and listen to that person. whatever they need, and take it serious. I mean, sometimes, in dealing with things, it's like, oh, it's just this or it's just that, but know that they're really feeling this, even though you don't see that person in the bush. They see it. It's real. They're experiencing it real, and just be there every step of the way and let them know that, hey, I'm here. Wherever you go, whatever part of life, whether you're in this world or in the other world, I'm there with you all the way, and just letting them know that you got their back and you're going to be supportive. That's the most important, one of the most important things.
Thank you. And Trinity, someone is asking, as a peer, they are constantly looking to improve the service they give to others. What was the most meaningful service that your peer provider provided to you?
My peer specifically provided sympathy, because an experience that I wouldn't say it was the root of my trauma, but it was probably 98% of why I acted a certain way. She actually experienced almost the same thing. And that kind of, it forced an emotion out of me. So her sympathy specifically tore down a brick wall that I have with everyone. So to know that she has felt worthless, and to know that she has had her dignity snatched away from her, that was a level of understanding that I didn't think anyone else shared with me. Mm-hmm. So a shared experience was what connected me and my peer.
Awesome. And then another question, I'm sorry, I just had it. So in your experiences, what role does employment and education have in your lives, and how can providers help support you in those efforts?
My education and employment specialist, I would say she's the most vital person on my team next to my therapist, because I'm really big in both of those areas. She provides things that are stepping stones. She tells me the right way and the wrong way to do things. She connects me with sources so that if I do it the wrong way, if she can't tell me, somebody else will tell me the right way. I think it is, how do I say, her neatness. She has things, put together in a box. So whenever I want to open the box, everything is there from level 1 to level 6. She is consistent. She's available. And anything she has said once, she can say it 6 times, because it's always the same. I appreciate that so much, because education and employment, I mean, it's the base of me. It is my foundation.
Thank you. And then Edith, have you all had experiences in education and employment services? And if so, how can providers help support you in those efforts?
Well, with my son, he'd already finished school, so the educational part, as far as the secondary part, he had already finished that, but he had actually talked about going to welding school. He wanted to be a welder, and they have a person on his team that coordinates that and say, okay, this is what you want to do, so this is what, and then they'll say, like, what does this look like? This is what you need to do. This is what kind of questions you may be asked, and so they'll take them and they'll even help them, go through all the steps that they need to do that. And then he's like, I can't do that. And so I want to go to work. So, okay, then they'll help them, do the resume, and they'll say, okay, here's some questions. Let's do a practice session. So here's what, if this happens at the job, what could you do? If you start having an episode at the job, what would you do? Or this is one of your questions an employer may ask you. And so they act out what what some questions are to be able to prepare him for that. And many of times he's excellent at getting jobs, but his anxiety and everything going everywhere, he just cannot function out there. So then he'll be back to like, well, I don't want to work. And then it's kind of like goes back and forth. But no matter how many times he changes his mind, they never like, you need to make up your mind on what you want to do. Now, you're going to do this? No, they're like, okay, so what do you want to do now? And they kind of put the ball back in his court and kind of see what is best, what do you want your world to look like now? And so then he said, well, okay, I want to start raising chickens. Okay, so how are you going to do that? What would you do? How would that look? And so just taking him through and being so very patient with him. And he loves to joke and kid around. They joke and kid around with him. And I've heard their conversations, and I have never, ever been disappointed in any of his team that he has working for him, or helping him to cope with being in society. They're just always there for him, no matter how many times they call him, no matter how many times, because he forgets. They repeat, and they just repeat the same thing. And like what Trinity said, they give him a toolbox to go into and to get his coping skills, and it has everything in there, and they keep adding to it, and I just love that they never get frustrated with him, because it can wear your patience at times. And it's like I catch myself even like, oh, we've been through this, but I'm like, I have to remember his brain does not work that way, and he forgets, so I have to restate it. But they have just been there for him and listened to his needs and what he's wanting at that moment, and things like that. And they get excited for him. They're like, yay, we're so excited for you. And then even if he loses the job, whatever reason, too much anxiety, that's okay. They never shame him or make him feel like, because he's already like, I tried so hard, I wanted this job, and we worked so hard for it. But I don't know, just always encouraging and being positive with him is just really, really, really good for him, because he already has a low self-esteem. He already has, people not accepting him. So just putting that, it's okay if this job is too much for you, we'll try something else. Just being able to keep trying and doing different things with him is a big, big help.
Thank you both. And it sounds like your experiences with specifically the education and employment has been really centered around what you or your son is wanting to do and wanting to focus on. So there's a couple of questions around person-centered treatment, where treatment is really led by the person and what they express as wants and needs, and led by what the treatment provider says needs to happen. So you've spoken to it in terms of education and employment, but could you speak a little more generally around your experiences on within your team, all of the services and all of the directions being really driven by what either you or your son needs and wants?
I think I'm very vocal whenever something is wrong, but that only works for a few people. Obviously in therapy, I can, she asked me, hey, what's been going on for the past 2 weeks? I can express my weak points. I can express when I need to vent or whenever I need to figure something out. That's the same thing with my peer. But as far as my education and employment specialist and my doctor, that does not always work. Because if I feel like I'm hungry at 9 a.m., I still have to go to work at 10. That's not the focus of what our meeting needs to be about. So I feel like my doctor and my education and employment specialist sometimes have to take charge and say, okay, that's cool, that's funny, that's fine, whatever. But what we need to focus on is, how about this resume? How about, getting to work on time? Things like that. My doctor I can talk to him all day, every day about, what's wrong. But the real questions are, have you been taking your medication? How's your sleep? Have you been irritable? Are you seeing or hearing anything that's not there? Mm-hmm. So I definitely think it's a person specific, whether or not my needs and wants are important. What, not even important, they're always important, but whether that's a source of interest for our meeting.
Thank you. Edith, do you have anything to add to that?
Actually, she said it all. I think that she said it all. I think that's really good.
Awesome. And along the same lines, there's the question around shared decision making. And how does shared decision making look in your team of providers? And can you provide an example of you all coming to a decision together in sessions or in your treatment?
An example I can give would be my most recent episode, which was maybe toward the end of 2019. And the decision was whether or not I need to go into a psychiatric facility. I was not mentally capable of saying, well, I think I verbally did say, hey, that's what's best for me. But my actions showed one thing and my mentality showed another. I was verbally saying things that was outside of my character that I would never say. So that was the time for my team to speak and say, okay, this is what's important. She is saying this, she is doing this. Now she does not have a choice. We are making your decision for you, because whenever you're in your right state of mind, you would not do things that you're doing now. I think me acting raw, not putting on a show, not saying things just because a certain amount of people are around, I think that was also beneficial to that decision. Because if I were to act like everything was put together and I get into a different setting, my actions would have been different. So I think that that decision, it was necessary for my team to take charge, and they ultimately made the right decision.
Thank you. Thank you. Edith, do you have anything to add around shared decision making and what that might have looked like or does look like in your experience?
Yes. One of the things when he was growing up, before he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, is he was a knife collector, and the grandpa that adopted him asked me if it was okay if he gave him knives. Sure, because no problem. Nothing had happened so far, and so he had quite a collection, and he loved them. He really adored of the all different kinds, and I didn't think anything about it, And then when his self-harm, that's what he would use to self-harm himself. He would cut mostly he would just cut his arms and his wrist. And when he started doing that, we came together as a group and we were talking about it. And when I tried to talk one-on-one with him, it didn't go over well at all. Because it's like, you're just trying to control me, this isn't working. And so I talked to his therapist alone, which I have paperwork saying that I can do that because he signed papers and everything. And we kind of got together as a team and we just kind of sat and talked about why would you think that that's controlling, and what makes you feel that way, and how could we make this will work? Because your mom is trying to protect you, because in that moment you're not knowing what you're doing. And so anyways, through talking out and kind of getting both, how do I say this, the therapist kind of like said, going from both sides, understanding both sides, we were able to, him being okay, I have his knives. It's not that he'll never see them again. They're still his. He just can't have them at this time, because he's not ready for them. And I said, I'm just keeping them for when you're ready for them, So that kind of like, it takes a whole different turn on it than I'm taking your knives and you're never getting them back. That's I think the way they word things and the way that it helps them to understand that it's not a control. I'm not trying to be controlling, because that was one of the issues that we were having. You're just trying to control me. And of course, this happened in an adult life. So it's really challenging, he's an adult. He's supposed to be making decisions on his own, but no, he can't, so we've had to come and work through that. And we sit and talk about, that we're not taking him away forever, who knows, you may get him back. And at times he did get him back, and then the same thing would happen again. So then we've taken him now for a longer time, and I still have them now. Now, if he wants to use a knife, like cutting up something in the kitchen, we're right there with him. Or a lot of times he's even come so far as to say, Mom, I'm having the urge. Would you cut my food up for me? And we've done it in restaurants. So I just cut his food up and put it back, to where it was just becoming a common thing. Whereas before it was like, no, this not working. But with this team helping us get through that and seeing the importance of why we're doing this, I think that helps a lot.
Thank you. That was very insightful. There's a question for you, Edith. Are there any services or resources that you did not receive that you wished you had received or would have liked to receive in your journey?
The only thing I could say is I wished we could have got help sooner. I really wished it would have happened sooner, and it didn't take so long, and he would be diagnosed correctly. The hospital that he went to right after the first episode, I believe in my heart, if that hospital would have done their job and would have kept him and ran tests, we could have got help better. But they totally misdiagnosed him, sent him home the next day, called me and said, hey, do you think you could keep him safe? And I'm like, well, I thought I could keep him safe last night, but obviously I didn't. I mean, and those were my exact words, because I'm just like, I'm still in shock. And I'm like, I don't know. I really do not feel that I can. And generally, when a person says that, that should have been a red flag for them to have kept him a little longer. But the services he's receiving now, he's covered. It's amazing. And if we did need anything, or like I told him about going on this journey and trying to be more open, they've given me tons of information. And hey, this is happening. In fact, they are the ones that told me about this conference and this opportunity, and they're very supportive. So right now we're getting everything. Just I wish we would have got it sooner, and he wouldn't may have to go through so much and things like that. So that's my only drawback on that.
Thank you. And there's several questions around, in light of COVID, many people are having to access or people are having to provide services remotely. And so there's several questions around that. And one specifically is, could you speak to anything that you have or would find helpful in receiving services remotely?
I find it helpful that I can do it in the comfort of my own space, not necessarily always home, but it doesn't always work out, but it's beneficial that I can have to be somewhere at 2, but then stop what I'm doing at the location I'm at that current time and have a meeting, versus the travel time, the traffic, checking into the office, having my meeting, and then going back to what I was doing the first time. So it's convenient for the location, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I think with my son, he struggles with this one because he likes in person. He likes to see. Like I said, we live out in the country, so he's kind of isolated, which is what he wants. He doesn't like to be around people, but having somebody to come to the house and talk to him, that is like the highlight of his day. But because of the COVID, just still having that phone call, and like one time he forgot to call them back because he was in the middle of doing something, and they're like, oh, just call me back when I think we were driving, and the highway we were on was kind of loud, so he couldn't really hear. And so, okay, that's no problem, just call me back. Well, he forgot, and so that raised a concern. So then they got his therapist to call him and say, hey, is everything okay? You know, because usually he calls right back. So I think being able to still be in touch with him and with his feelings and making sure that he wasn't trying to self-harm or anything like that. I think that was very good during this time, that they still stay in contact and there still are like, okay, that was a red flag. So, and all it was that he forgot. He appreciates that, and being able to have that person to check in and say, hey, because what they call it is kind of like, I care is what they're calling to say, you know, I care about you. I want to know how your day is. I want to know what you've experienced. What are your highlights? What are your lowlights? You know, and I think that really helps during this time, because it's hard on him. It's very hard.
Thank you. And we have time for probably one more question. And so I wanted to end on this question. First of all, the question asker says, thank you both for sharing your experiences. It's so meaningful and perspective offering. And the question is, what would you like for youth and families to know when they are first experiencing an onset of psychosis and considering entering into mental health services?
A few things, but the first one, I would like to share that what I was told when I was beginning therapeutic services, I was told, you may not always like what I'm going to tell you or what I advise you, but I'm always going to tell you something that's going to be in your best interest. I'm not going to lead you the wrong way. I think that's something that stuck with me, because even whenever I was conscious of the wrong decision and I still wanted to make that wrong decision, that stuck. If I allow my therapist to make this decision for me, if I allow any person on my team, I'm not going to be led astray. So that's very important whenever accepting mental services. And I would also say, allow yourself to receive help. Because if you are closed from bettering yourself, you'll never get better. You have to want something, and you have to want to absorb what other people have to say. Really allow yourself to receive the help. It may not work in 2 months, it may not work in 2 weeks, but ultimately you're gonna get better. So be willing to receive the help.
Thank you. And Edith?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yes, of
I'm
course.
sorry.
No, you're fine. So the question is, what would you like for youth and families to know when they are first experiencing an onset of psychosis and considering or entering into mental health services?
Just, I'm not really exactly sure how to say the answer to that question, or how to answer that question, but I guess just some words of encouragement would be, don't be afraid to reach out and be honest. You know, if you're really feeling whatever you're feeling, just say what you're feeling. Because a lot of times my son would not want to tell me that he's hearing the voices, they're so loud, because he didn't want me to worry about him, or he was having the urge or anything like that. And so his therapist said to encourage him, you know, your parents, you know, your mom is in the best interest of you, you know, just open up to her and let her know so that she can help you, and or at least, you know, be aware. And I think that's the most important. You know, you don't have to hide your feelings. You know, I'm feeling this, and I don't know why. I hear this and I don't know why. And just I would just share anything. And or if you don't understand something, I don't understand that. You know, can you explain it to me more? Because he has to have really detailed instructions, and they're so good with him on that. And sometimes I've seen them have to repeat it 4 to 5 times, and they're saying the same thing, but yet they're saying it in a different way to make sure that he has a clear understanding of what's going on with his body, and being in touch with it, and knowing, hey, I'm feeling this, so I need to do this, or, you know, kind of like going back to the toolbox, being able to reach in there and get those coping skills and being in touch with your body is a big, important thing.
Thank you. And again, I just want to say personally, thank you both so much for sharing your time and your experiences and your journeys today. I personally am very inspired by everything that you've said. And again, look in the chat box and you'll see that from the other participants as well. And with that, I will hand it back over to David.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your expertise and your wisdom, and also your willingness to share this. And a special thank you also to Dr. Jones for your willingness to help facilitate this panel.